Welcome everybody to the War Room. This is the pre-game show for Cards Open 10. That is right, this is the 10th edition of Cards Open. It's been amazing to see the changes and the growth over the last, I guess, about 2 years now. So we've got a lot to get you caught up on. We have our panel of experts who are going to break down all of the decks. We're going to get you ready and up to speed for the action. It's going to take place in about 30 minutes or so. I will be joined by Ollie, Spooz, and Bubbles to cast all of the action. So while we're getting you ready, let's take a look at the bracket and walk you through who you will be seeing compete today. On the left side of the bracket, we have friend of the show Darkness, who went a perfect 7-0 to qualify and make it to the semifinals. Darkness is going to be taking on Vinny in our first matchup. On the other side of the bracket, we have relative newcomer Dian, who has had their coming out party during the OCC in January, continued a very strong push in the February OCC, and here we have them competing in the final four of their first Cards Open, taking on Noein5. So we have a lot of familiar names. We have one relative newcomer, but I am excited to see how this all plays out. Like I said, we're going to be going to Bubbles, Spooz, and Ollie for the cast in about 30 minutes, where we will find out exactly who is going to take home the lion's share of the $1,500 prize pool. Now, to continue to get you ready, to give you insight into what's going to go on, I am going to be joined by Bubbles and Spooz, and we're going to walk you through the deck lists. Welcome, gentlemen. Now, Bubbles, I have to start with you. Normally you have Darkness sitting to your, I guess in this case, to your left. You're joined by Spooz today. How does that feel? Missing your buddy?
I mean, Darkness is playing, right? So I think it's okay. You know, I've got my replacement German in to take his place. Yeah, I have a whole sort of cupboard of them. If Spooz was in as well, we get sort of Wild Eyes in. You know, we replace them with each other as needs be.
I will not tell Darkness that he is interchangeable with any other German you happen to find. I will not.
It has to be something in his contract, right? There's written there always has to be a German on his side.
Yeah, I demand it.
I mean, Bubbles, it's better than having to pick out all of the green Skittles out of your bowl in the green room. So I'm totally cool with you having your partner always be German. Spooz, it is great to have you here. I know we haven't been on a War Room together in a little bit, so I'm excited to have you with us. Let's get right into the decks, shall we? I believe we have Darkness up first. Let's jump into to see what we got here. So Bubbles, when you take that first initial look at this deck list, Darkness, of course, going 7-0 in Swiss. What are you thinking?
So obviously, I see the double hand control, hand lock decks that Jaking brought. Not the exact versions, but a few edits to them. But I think he's definitely taken inspiration from Jaking, his teammate here, which is no surprise. You know, Jaking had a lot of success in the recent OCC, so I think learning from your teammates' success and talking with them about what went well, I think is a really important thing to do, and part of the advantage of having sort of a practice group, practice team and cards. So I'm very happy to see him do that. We also have the Soviet Italy deck, which once again is a Jaking classic. So maybe you can sort of got a bit of a Jedi Master and Jedi Apprentice situation going on here. And then we also have this Poland deck, which I know is a bit of a new concept, Japan-Poland. We've experimented with it a bit in the past, but it was really not on par with any of the other decks. So I'm very excited to see how this plays out with the new expansion. We've got some new cards for Japan having Intel in a recent patch. Then we also have some new Polish cards in the expansion. So I'm excited to see how this deck works.
Yeah, especially because it's also just showing the Darkness just playing his strengths here, right? Like 4 control decks, not any aggro. 4 decks that just play into the archetype that you want to control your opponent's board, his hand size with the double discard deck. So yeah, Darkness just playing 4 decks that really rely on his strengths, and I think he's the one to beat here today.
Yeah, I do just want to add, while I joke about him learning from J King here and all that. Darkness is a very capable player, and he's very strong at playing control. I would be shocked if he wasn't very comfortable in any of these decks, just in his own manner, because control is sort of where he shines.
That's what I was going to ask, because I know you were joking about it, Bubbles, when you said kind of the apprentice versus the master, and hopefully Darkness isn't listening, because I feel like he wouldn't love that comment. But, you know, there is a playstyle difference, right? Some people are more comfortable with control, some people are more comfortable with aggro. You know, Spooz, you brought it up specifically that Darkness is very comfortable playing control. Do you think that that was a big part of this mindset, that he knew, hey, I want to bring control, this is where my strong suit is, I'm going to build a set of decks around that strategy? Do you think that was kind of the mentality going into this?
I mean, he saw J King being very successful with these decks, and 3 of these decks that he's bringing here. And 3 of these decks are really playing into his type of playing the game. And yeah, why would you not use these decks? They are proven to be good. He's just adapting them a little bit into his playstyle with switching some cards that might fit more, or he finds fit better into this deck. And then you go for it. And I think, as I said, he's having good chances here with these decks. They showed very strong in the OCC, and I expect them also to be very good here today.
Thanks, Spooz. Bubbles, you know, coming into this, obviously we talked about how J King had seen success with these types of lists. Do you expect kind of the mini, like the tournament meta in the Open to be kind of reflective of what we saw in the OCC earlier this month?
I'm actually expecting it not to be very reflective of that. I think J King was the only person there bringing a sort of hand lock, and with these Britain and Germany, and then Germany and Britain, no one else was really bringing these, and they've not been too popular on the ladder at the moment. So I think while J King had a lot of success with this, it felt a little bit too niche for it to affect the meta. So I don't think people have particularly adjusted to it. I don't think people are really expecting it. I know it was a very smart choice from J King and the OCC to predict this being very good here. But I think most players have sort of overlooked it. So I think Darkness may be able to replicate that success, because I don't think too many people are fully preparing for it. We don't have cards like the M4A one or the Jackson having a spike and play. Jackson obviously being a great counter to the turn 1 U16, as you can just discard your Jackson and get a tank for free. We've not seen any of these tech decks against it. I think people sort of, this still isn't on their radar, and I think if Darkness has great success today with these decks, they are suddenly going to be on people's radar a lot. I think this is sort of the test of, do these decks become meta, or was it just a one-time, success story?
I think that's a really great point, Bubbles, because oftentimes when you see a big event go on, especially the OCC, so much of the community is watching it. They're looking at the best players competing with what they assume are the best deck lists. So you see some people trying to replicate that maybe on ladder or in their next tournaments. But like you mentioned, with one kind of event where you have, let's say, J King performing well, you don't know if it's really something that's going to change and shape the meta, or if it's simply kind of that, hey, people were unprepared, next time around it won't go the same way. So I am curious to see as well if Darkness will have the same level of success. Like Spooz mentioned, he's, from a pedigree perspective, he's got to be one of the favorites coming into this, having all of the experience, having seen success in previous Opens. So I am curious to see how this is going to play out, and not only that, but how it will shape the meta as we continue to move forward. Looks like we have Vinny's decks up next, so let's bring those over. Spooz, why don't you take a crack at those and let us know what you think?
Yeah, I think Vinny is one of the players that is bringing the most interesting decks today here. Like, we finally have the first appearance in an official tournament of the 2-pounder deck. A British US deck that is having that small little tiny artillery that is a 1/2 with 0 operation cost to credit artillery. And I think I created a deck like this almost 1 year ago, and it fell out to be very, very strong in the past. But with the new expansion, bringing stuff like the second parachute, like a 2-drop that is giving a unit pincer, and when this pincered unit deals damage to a unit, it kills it. And that is a very good synergy with the 2-pounder and other stuff that like bombers or airplanes in general. And I like to see that deck being played today here, and also stuff like First London Brigade in it, cards that we have not seen in any official tournament so far. And I'm looking forward to that deck, seeing that in action against all these well-designed, well-proven decks. And it will be hard to deal with this for the opponents, I guess. Then we have a US Italy ramp deck. Also some very interesting card choices in that, like the 33rd Livorno Regiment. We also haven't seen that in any official tournament. That is the 5/7 Italian card that is getting its attack reduced every time it receives damage. Or every time it's getting attacked, so it's even stronger than just... So if you attack for yourself, you don't lose attack. If it's getting attacked, it is losing attack there. So very interesting card. And also Era Cobra, also a card that's not played that often in any official tournaments. Then we have Soviet US control. Okay, that is more like a... You don't see Soviet US that often these days. It's more like you see Soviet Italy these days as a control archetype. Vinny deciding to go with Soviet US here, which has way more heavy removal like the Avenger and B-17 in it. And then we have one aggro deck in this list, the well-known Japan, Germany aggro Feint Retreat deck. Yeah, I did not see anything that stands out with this deck, just the standard aggro deck. I think he does not want to bring 4 control decks here, just something to have a chance against an opponent that is weak against aggro. And yeah, that's the deck. So I'm not sure if I missed anything, Bubbles, if you want to add something or...
I don't think you missed anything particular. I think with the Soviet US deck, an exciting combo to look out for is he does have 2 Euro factories and 2 B-17s. And obviously you can Euro factory a B-17 to get like a Pershing or the other B-17, I believe it is a 6/6 bomber, which cannot be targeted by orders. So there's some excitement there to be had. And also this Livorno that you pointed out, it's very interesting. And my little theory on this is you ramp on turn 2, you drop this on turn 3, you can Man Nostrum it, and it gives you a very powerful unit to fight with against aggressive decks. And with the removal of 99th Infantry bounce, there's a lot less bounce floating about right now. So the idea of putting down a well-statted unit and Man Nostruming it might be stronger than it was before.
Yeah, good points.
So Bubbles, I'm going to start with you because I know your love of, combo decks and otherwise gimmicky decks. And Spooz mentioned, this is the first time we are seeing certain cards in a tournament meta like this. I feel like from a creativity perspective, the game has changed a lot. People are bringing that slightly less standard, so to speak, control list or aggro list or whatever it may be. And they're getting a bit more creative and a little bit more confident in some of these homebrews that they're kind of bringing to events. Is that something that you've been, how do you feel about that? Obviously loving that creative side of things. Are you appreciating that? Do you think the game has kind of turned a corner where people are more comfortable bringing different things? Or do you think that at a certain point there's going to be that swing back to, well, I know these 4 control lists are going to be able to take care of whatever people are bringing. This is what I'm going to do now.
And I think there's 2 different groups of people that look at it. I think you have the sort of very traditional people that are still bringing the traditional decks and having great success from it. However, using traditional decks does put you at a slight disadvantage, which is the people out there experimenting and trying things will be finding these new meta decks before you. You'll be sort of following in their wake. And I think this is something which some players, such as Ari Big Ben, are well known for doing in the past. Ari's known for pioneering a lot of deck types, such as the notorious Fast Heinz deck, which he pioneered in a non-money tournament, foolishly. But I think now people are starting to realize that, hey, if I experiment and I try things, there's a lot of, really powerful ways of playing this game which are yet to be done. I think a big highlighter of this was Viabator in the World Championship. He came in with a lot of decks which no one had seen before and no one understood and no one even knew existed. And he had a lot of success with it, getting himself top 4 in the World Championship. So I think his placement in there and then Dian's recent success in an OCC with these combo decks has sort of made people realize that, hey, I actually have the space to be free and sort of try out things. And not only do I have the space, there's a real advantage to it. And I think personally there's a bit of a beauty in building your own deck in a card game. I remember playing Magic the Gathering back when I was young, and we'd have, a load of terrible bulk cards. The most enjoyable part was me and all my mates hanging out and building our decks. We'd play a couple games with them, but we'd usually just reconstruct them not long after. I think building cool and creative and expressing yourself through card games is something which people from outside card games, it might sound really weird. You can express yourself through this. You can sort of, be creative and express who you are. But yes, there's so much freedom, and that you've got so much choice on how you do it. And I think you can really tailor a deck to suit you, and it's sort of like an art form. And I don't want to get too cheesy with it, but I do think there's a certain beauty to what you can do in deck building, and I'm really happy to see more people opening up to this idea and sort of pushing the boundaries of what is a deck and cards.
I love that answer, Bubbles, because like you said, you can express yourself. Spooz talked about it before with Darkness. His strength is control. That's what he enjoys playing. That's what he's best at. So why wouldn't I build around that? I think as a spectator to cards as well, when you see a matchup go on that isn't cookie cutter, where you've prepped for the deck, exactly every card that's in it and the sequence that they get played, you're able to create a lot more interesting moments and more fun. You get excited about it. I remember watching the qualifiers for the World Championship last year, and the decks Viabator brought, the reaction the casters were having, the fun, the engagement, the surprise that goes on. It creates a whole new viewing experience as well, which I think is really important for the game. Spooz, you brought up creating the 2-pounder or playing the 2-pounder deck about a year or so ago, realizing, hey, this works. Are you on that same vein of we want to be, creative when we can and have fun with it, and it's not just about winning, but about kind of expressing yourself, like Bubbles mentioned?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm a big fan of creating decks for yourself. I mean, I gave up the competitive play of cards long time ago when I'm on stream. I just want to show my audience what you can do with cards. It's not just seeing a deck being played in an OCC, copy it and play it on ladder. I think that's just becoming boring after some time, and it's not really enjoyable. There are always different type of people, right? There are people that enjoying copying decks, playing them, being successful with them, climbing the ladder. But I'm with Bubbles here. It's just the creativity. So with all the card pool there, you have almost unlimited variants of decks you can play, unlimited ideas. You can combine these cards, trials, so many combinations in the game, and that's what I'm really enjoying. And also, it's very, very, as you mentioned already, very highlighting for the audience here to see new decks, different decks, how they compete against each other, how different archetypes are just played against each other, what players have to be aware of when facing a combo deck, for example. You have to play completely different than against an aggro matchup. And that's what it's making deck versatility so interesting and so nice to watch. And I'm really looking forward to see the meta just staying like this, that we see so many different decks in each tournament, and hope this stays for a while.
Awesome. I thank you, Spooz. I think that it's such a great point, because you might see an OCC happen, a Cards Open happen, the deck lists are available for all, and like you said, somebody grabs it and says, oh, this deck won the OCC, I'm just going to play it on ladder. But that's not how it works. Not understanding it, not knowing it, playing ladder versus tournament, it's so different, but you can get really a better understanding of decks when you're building them yourself, putting them together and working through the synergies. So I totally agree with you there. Let's bring up the next set of deck lists. We got two more to run through. I believe next up we have Dian. So Bubbles, why don't you get us started with what Dian's got on the table today?
Yeah, so Dian's got some very interesting decks today. I think the one I want to start on actually is this Germany-France one. This deck is notorious amongst some parts of the community and unknown to other, and we actually have a nickname for this deck already. which is cornflakes. This deck is referred to as the cornflakes. Because, I'll leave the explanation behind, but let's just say it's sort of like playing against this, it feels like having someone abuse your cornflakes, to put politely. It can be a very annoying experience. It's the most burned thing we have in cards at the moment. It is quite literally burned. You have, cards like Kriegsmarine and Reichsbank, which complement very well together. You Reichsbank, you Phony War your opponent's hand, you Kriegsmarine, do a whole bunch of damage, and then you have cards like Cross of Lorraine, which is essentially an air blitz, which can cost 0. It can be super, super powerful. And this deck, you just try to burn out your opponents as quickly as possible. It's really, really powerful against decks like USA Midrange. I think this is one of the key decks that can just destroy USA Midrange, because you just burn them out often quicker than they can kill you unless they get like a blitz. I think the next deck I want to talk about, if we just go left to right, is this Brit-Japan deck. It's credit denial. I don't think there's any other way of putting it. This deck is pure credit denial. We've got 3 blockades. We've got these sort of daylight bombings, all this sort of stuff, the shelling. And then we have 2 Japanese cards, which are Southern Plan. Now, for those that don't know what Southern Plan do, it reduces your opponent's credit slot by 1 and provides you an extra 1. So the whole style with this deck is to get a really early lead using Observer Call to Southern Plan to shelling to create a difference in credits, and then to try and do as much comboing with your commanders as you can possibly before your opponent catches up with credits. However, if the game goes late, your advantage is very much lost. You have a very early game advantage, because at that point every credit matters. But when you start hitting like turn 8, turn 9, your opponent starts to catch up with you. It can really start to fall off a little bit. So you really need a very strong start for this deck to work. We then see, once again, Japan, Germany, Fast Hinds. Not Fast Hinds, Feigned Retreat. Oh god, my mouth today is talking just a complete different language. But yeah, we have Japan, Germany, Fast Hinds. I did it again.
Too many Germans next to you, right?
Too many Germans. I think this Feigned Retreat deck is possibly the most popular deck of the tournament. We see 3 different players bringing this. It seems really, really popular. And I think this is a common thing when players have to bring 4 decks, is they bring the 3 decks they're comfortable with, and then they think, what should I do for the 4th deck? I'll just do Japan aggro. I'll just chuck that in. It's a very simple deck to play. I think most cards players have had a point in their life where they've been like, oh, I love Japan aggro, I'm just going to play loads of Japan aggro. So I think most people are experienced on it, and it's a very nice sort of wild card deck. And then we also have this USA deck, which is USA, I believe, Poland, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is USA Legions. It's a bit interesting. I'm not really too sure how it plays compared to Brit Poland and Japan Poland. I think it's the one I'm least experienced in. Do you have much experience with this one, Spooz?
Not really. Usually these days, as you mentioned, Brit Poland is more common, or even Japan Poland might be the most played archetype at this moment. But yeah, I think this, in my opinion, might be the worst Legion deck. But yeah, there might be a reason why Dian picked it here. I think we also have to mention that the Dian is relatively new to the game, and therefore some of his deck choices and also card choices might just be impacted by a not that complete collection there, I think. So I think maybe that was a choice to because we saw him in one of the earlier tournaments play US mid-range a lot, so maybe he's just having a more complete US collection there, and that's why he's choosing US for his main faction here. That's all things we don't know, and that might just influence the deck choices there.
And I think that's a great point, Spooz, because it also gives you the opportunity to, again, like we were talking about before, put something together that's maybe a little bit different than what people are expecting and what they normally see. So you can get a bit creative, maybe throw your opponents off. And that's something that Dian has definitely been able to do in their previous 2 appearances in OCC. He's definitely been able to mix stuff up. So we've got one final list we want to get through here to get everybody up to speed before we jump into the action. This is Noein5. Spooz, why don't you kick us off and walk us through the deck lists?
Sure. So starting with the German US Fast Heinz deck here without Fast Heinz. We've already seen that in the OCC. A deck that is very, very aggressive. Noein5 is playing with 3 Blitzkriegs in it. So a deck you want to find your early Greif for. That I think that's one of the key cards you want to have in your starting hand. The Greif, that 1/1 tank that is giving all other tanks -1 operation cost. That can just be so explosive in the early stages of the game. Like if you have this in your starting hand, just drop 3 tanks in the first 2 turns, and then on turn 3 you go to the front line, play your Blitzkrieg and overwhelm your opponent. It can be very, very fast, but as we saw in the OCC2 from Kowalczyk and John PX, I guess, when your opponent is dealing with your early aggression and can manage to get to the front line even, you have very, very big problems with this deck, and it has to pop off early or you just fall behind and lose the game there. Then we have Germany, no, then we have the US-Poland, another US-Poland Legions deck. We already saw a similar archetype from Dian there. So I'm also not too experienced with that archetype, and I'm excited to see how it plays exactly and how you play it on a high level. It just has cards like the 2nd California and it also the Medical Battalion, which I find pretty interesting that it's played in such an archetype. Excited to see if this pays out in this. And the third deck, we have Britain-Japan Air. So Noein5 really, really well known for playing a lot of Brit-Japan Air. I think he's just mastered this deck and it might be his favorite archetype here. He's also bringing the recently buffed Sonya in his deck. And also, yeah, just the cards like Air Superiority. Type 93, also very interesting. I think in earlier stages, he was playing it with 3 of the Type 93. That 1/1 tank that is giving all units +1 attack. He's now down to 1. So I think with the Sonya in it, I think he just found better alternatives for the Type 93 in this deck than that card. And as a force deck, we just have Japan, German, Feint Retreat again. So I think this might be the most popular deck today, as 3 players are bringing this. And yeah, that's the 4 decks from Noein5. Anything else to add, Bubbles?
I think the only thing I really see is the difference in these USA Poland decks. This one seems far more like a mid-range, a bit more aggressive, whereas Dian seemed a bit more ramp and late gamey. So it'll be interesting to see how these play out, possibly against each other, but also against different opponents, just to see the difference in how they operate and the 2 different styles of this USA Poland deck.
I think that that's a big piece of what we're going to see. You know, we talked about the fact that there are some of the more popular decks that we're seeing 2 or 3 times in this event, but not all card choices are equal. Not everybody's bringing the exact same list. So it's going to be a question of kind of one-upsmanship in that scenario. Whose little personalized tweaks can make all of the difference when you're going into some of those head-to-head matchups. So we have got the top 4 coming up in just a few moments.